Okay, this is kind of impromptu. In my state of indecisiveness of either wanting to play games I don't want to play or taking a nap I do not want to fucking partake in, I might as well get this little video out of the way here. I have two videos in particular here I want to try making here, and they're all based around a very old survival horror game, even though the survival and horror aspects are kind of questionable if you're a veteran and the old part. But I wanted to talk about Dead Space for a little bit. In particular, Dead Space 1, Dead Space 2. I want to talk about what the best weapon is in those two games, and uh, it's there's only two guns. Now, some of those weapons they may have different niches. The Ripper's really great at dismembering enemies. The flamethrower could be good for taking on those doing damage over time, taking out those small little fuckers that come out of like the pregnant necromorphs bellies. What were the other weapons? The contact beam is basically the BFG, yada yada yada. And the force gun is kind of like a shotgun. And if we're talking about Dead Space 2, there is the mine launcher, which is, let's fucking face it, no one ever used it unless it was to take out those running assholes, the stalkers, or to farm up money from selling infinite mines of the DLC, or the seeker rifle, which is basically a more precise contact beam, a little bit more ammo, some more long range, and it was just basically a 50 cal sniper rifle. But no, the two guns that I'm talking about here, sorry, not guns, mining. Well, now one's a mining tool, one's a legitimate gun. I'm talking about the plasma cutter and the pulse rifle. And to sum it up short, pulse rifle wins in my opinion. But I will give each side its credit as to which one works better and, like what situations they fill. And I'll start off first with the staple weapon. The weapon you get within the first 5 minutes of every Dead Space game. Unless we're talking about Dead Space 3 where they start you off with SMG and the plasma cutter. But I'm not going to talk about Dead Space 3 because I feel I played Dead Space 1 2 more than Dead Space 3. But the first gun is the plasma cutter. It's practically the 45 of the Dead Space universe. And, I mean, who can, go up against that fact? Fuck, I love the pause feature on this thing. I just managed to get myself a small drink of unhealthy carbonated beverages here. But the plasma cutter. It's the first weapon you get in both games, and yeah, it's such a decent weapon because it fills so many roles. You can use it for the whole game. But the plasma cutter. What is the plasma cutter? To give it the short rundown, it's a portable mineral cutter that's used to mine space rocks, basically, and just cut down the minerals from that. And no one ever thought it'd be such an effective weapon against dismembering fucking limbs. And if anybody that has played Dead Space just remembers that fateful opening of whenever you're running away from the fucking necromorphs in the hallway, you go down that elevator, you're in that mining room, and you just see that board on the wall covered in blood, and it just says cut off their limbs, and you see the plasma cutter right there. That is your baby. That is your main weapon for the whole game. And it's true because in Dead Space 1 there is a trophy to complete the entire game using just the plasma cutter, and I think that trophy is just telling as to how effective it is. Because in all fairness, the plasma cutter is not a shit fucking weapon. You actually can beat the whole game with just that one. Unlike other games where they might give you a challenge in terms of like completing it with like a certain weapon. The only game that I can remember is Duke Nukem Forever. Yes, I'm making that an example. Where you have to beat the whole game with the golden pistol on you. Now, of course, you can swap it out if you gotta use a different weapon at a time. Or, if you're out of ammo, you can use something else. But it has to be in your inventory, if I remember correctly, at the end game. But besides that, I mean, the plasma cutter from Dead Space is such an effective tool. And here are my cases. whenever it's fully upgraded, it doesn't really have any weaknesses that I could see. You know, it has a 90-degree adjustment angle, so you can choose to either dismember arms or legs. It has a respectable firing rate. It does rather decent damage. Unmodified, it does take about 2 rounds to dismember an enemy, but if you know how to effectively use the tool, on the general necromorph population, the easiest trick is to literally, and I shit you not, take out one leg with 2 shots. The necromorph falls down. You get at least 3 seconds to fall up with a couple of extra attacks. And all you have to do really is dismember another limb. That's the trick. You can't dismember both their legs, because they might still have a chance of coming after you. But if you take out the leg and you take out an arm, just GG, you won against that fucking necromorph. That was basically the easiest way to do it. And as you increase the damage up from 10 to 18, I believe, if I'm right, the plasma cutter did do enough damage on the basic starting necromorphs, not the black ones. Fuck the black ones. Okay, that came off the wrong way, but hopefully you guys understand and know what I mean. But the beginning necromorphs, they can typically die or get dismembered in one shot. So it goes from 4 plasma cutter rounds to practically 2. It's really handy. And then, you know, if you're talking about Dead Space 2, technically it would take 3 shots, because it would be 2 shots to take him down. You gotta follow up with an extra shot if you want to get the items off him, because Dead Space 2 had that new added step of, if you want to get the item off them, you have to stomp on them or shoot them, which actually does benefit the pulse rifle, but I'll talk about that later in the future. Back to the plasma cutter. 2 shots, fuckers down, but if it's the enhanced, stronger necromorphs, the black ones, it'll take a couple of extra shots because they're a lot more durable. But again, beyond all that, I mean, decent damage, has a 90%, you know, angle change, has a respectable reload, great ammo capacity, and the stacks aren't typically too bad. If I'm right, you get around like 5 rounds per pickup, I think, which almost adds up to, you know, like 2 kills per stack once you get fully added up. But then it goes up to like a maximum 25 rounds. So you basically hold about maybe 12 kills per inventory slot. It's not too bad. Again, it's just the plasma cutter is a serviceable weapon. But I think where it has its true potential is its staying power in the universe. It's the iconic weapon to Isaac Clarke. If a Jedi has a lightsaber, or the assassins have their hidden blades, Isaac Clarke, the badass engineer himself, has the plasma cutter. It's featured in all the games, unless we exclude the couple of other games where, let's just take Extraction, the Wii game that got ported over the PS3. That one, you start out with a nail gun, you can get the plasma cutter, but it's obviously severely gimped in some ways. And, what was the other game? What was the other one? There was also a mobile game that I can't recall at all, but I remember that one. If you get 1,000,000 credits, you can get unlimited ammo pulse rifle. Like, where the fuck was that? In my game playthroughs, like, fucking Christ. But, yeah. It's just a staple of the game series. You see it on all the fucking covers. I mean, for fuck's sake, you know, in the beginning, spoiler, in the beginning of part 2, you literally take a flashlight. And, like, Isaac displays his intelligence and crafting finesse right then, right there. You get into an operating room, some poor sap is on the operating table, and he just sees a tissue cutter. A plasma cutter? And he just fucking goes to work trying to dismantle it to put it on his flashlight, so he has a shot of, you know, kicking ass and surviving. And from there, it's like, he's trying to do all that, and a necromorph comes in. Now, in the previous scenes, let's just say this one scene here, I won't lie, it does make Isaac feel like an asshole, because if, say, you're playing on normal mode, you could easily run up to that necromorph and just punch him out a couple times. I feel you could have had a choice here where you could have like had a harder route, go up against the Necromorph, fight him yourself, maybe lose a little bit of health, but you guarantee this fucking guy, survives. Then again, he's on the operating table, his chest is wide open. I guess his fate was kind of sealed from the get-go. But that was like the one part I do kind of dislike about Dead Space 2 is you let this poor sap, spoiler, fucking die. He dies while you're trying to, finesse a fucking plasma cutter here from a flashlight and a tissue cutter. But at the sacrifice of this, poor patient, you succeed and you make a custom-made plasma cutter that you get to use for the rest of the game. Now, thankfully, for Dead Space 2, if you have a save file from the first one, you can get the original. So I think this is like one of the cases where, all the original weapons return. I don't consider this handmade plasma cutter, like a plasma cutter from the first game. It's an original idea, given it shares the upgrades between both of them, but I feel it's completely different. It's not a true plasma cutter. It is a tissue cutter. But semantics aside, the plasma cutter is a balanced, handgun, essentially. In other games where the handgun was kind of like a last resort weapon, the plasma cutter just stands on top of some of them and goes, nah, I could fuck some shit up. But that's basically all the parts of the plasma cutter that I can remember for the most part. It has decent ammo pickup, decent firing rate. Depending on the difficulty and the damage upgrades, you can dismember limbs in one hit. Again, depending on the enemy as well, unfortunately. Yada, yada, yada. And its altering firing rate is that 90-degree, shift for the aiming. But now, let's talk about the true king. In my opinion, the pulse rifle. Now, at first on paper, you may think the pulse rifle is kind of shit. And at the start of the game, yes, it is shit. I will confess to that. But as time goes on, you soon realize that the pulse rifle, at least in terms of the math and its utilities, actually outshines the plasma cutter in all aspects, even damage. So let's just start off. The pulse rifle is a 3-barreled assault rifle that, if I'm correct, uses a special type of ammunition, I think, that doesn't tear through the hulls of the ship. I think they use like some form of hollow point ammunition. Like that's where it gets its stopping power on some of the necromorphs. And it has a respectable ammo capacity, I think. I think it starts off at 50 rounds. A huge increase compared to the 10 rounds that the plasma cutter has at the start, but it does effectively half the damage. The pulse rifle does about 5 damage as opposed to 9. And when fully upgraded, it has a ridiculous firing rate that doesn't really get upgraded unless you're in Dead Space 2 and you use certain weapons to boost the firing rate, but it's so minuscule you don't notice it. And it does 9 damage and holds a ridiculous 175 rounds in a magazine. And its aiming ability is a little bit more simplified. And that's where I think some of its versatility comes from compared to the plasma cutter, is that it's a triangular shape. So when you fire that round, when you fire the pulse rifle, it's just in a triangular shape. So it kind of helps with the dismembering because you don't have to worry about having to toggle that extra button to try and readjust the aiming reticle depending on the limb. No, you can just fire it whenever you want and go for the arms or the legs or the head, whatever. It's triangular shape. It gives you a better range of options. And the damage at first may seem really shit. Once fully upgraded, it's 9 damage. It's almost on par with unupgraded, plasma cutter. But what it lacks in terms of raw firepower, it makes up for in stopping power. Because in Dead Space 1, there was kind of a gimmick when you fired on a necromorph. They would stop for like half a second, a third of a second. They kind of buffed it with the pulse rifle in Dead Space 2, which is why it's considerably better in Dead Space 2 than Dead Space 1. It's still usable in the first one, but in Dead Space 2, they definitely buffed it in some ways, especially the secondary like, alt fire. And with the pulse rifle, because of its huge firing rate, if you're willing to risk a few rounds and just aim for the torso, you can effectively stun lock an enemy in the game. Something you can't really do with the plasma cutter because it's slower firing rate. And as a result, you could use the pulse rifle to stun one enemy and focus on another one. That's not even it. It's because of its huge firing rate and its respectable 10 damage or 9 damage. You can actually still dismember fucking necromorphs. And this is where the math comes into play. I think that's what I was talking about before earlier on about the ammo pickups. Is that compared to the 5-ish rounds or 3 to 5 rounds you get from the plasma cutter, you get like 25 or 75 rounds with the pulse rifle. And if you do the math, I'm actually going to do the math right now because fuck it, we might as well make sure we get this type of fucking shit out of the way here. Let's just say fully upgraded. You do 18 rounds with the plasma cutter. So let's just do 18 times 25 rounds a stack. You do 450 damage per stack. Now, if I remember correctly, I think you can hold 75 rounds with a pulse rifle. Let's just do 75 times 9. 675. So you're almost going up by about 50%. And I try and think of it as economical as possible. And that's like one of the reasons why I think the pulse rifle deserves like a clear win over the plasma cutter, is because it's a lot more economically feasible to use the pulse rifle and not have to worry about ammo. Now, of course, I did replay Dead Space 1 a year and a half ago, and there were actually some cases where I was very low on ammo, but it was because I had 2 weapons on me, I believe. Or was it in Dead Space 2? No, I think it was Dead Space 2. I had 2 weapons on me. Because I do know of a secret money, not exploit, but money hack, I guess, where if you have the contact beam on you, you can make ridiculous money. And unfortunately, if you're playing Dead Space 2 on the PC, there's already a patch applied where it gives you all the DLC for free because it wasn't released on Steam. So unfortunately, you get the DLC contact beams, you get the DLC pulse rifles, basically at the first store. So before you even get to like the second chapter or the third chapter in Dead Space 2, you can get the pulse rifle. Now, Dead Space 1, unfortunately, it never got that type of patch. You still have to wait until the end of the first chapter to buy the pulse rifle from the store. But I mean, in Dead Space 2, you could just have the pulse rifle practically from the start, and you get the contact beam. And what was great about the contact beam was that shit sold for a fuck-ola amount of money. To the point where you can make yourself, like, 500,000 credits by the time you got the sequence, like, not sequence, thinking Assassin's Creed now. You get to Chapter 7, which by that point you'll get the vintage suit. And if you're smart enough, you can basically upgrade all of your abilities. All the health, kinesis, stasis, weapon of choice, everything, up to max. Because you just have so much money, and you manage to save 10% to get a couple of extra nodes. But that's something else entirely different. Great, I love tangents. Right, so yes, it was a little bit harder because I had 2 weapons on me. The contact beam ended up making me lose some pulse rifle rounds, so I did have a little bit of a hard time playing it. But the money outweighed the difficulty. And that's like the one gripe with it. You know, there's still some RNG based around it. If you have one weapon only, you do get some good drops for that one weapon, but there will still be times where you'll get ammo for a different weapon. You're kind of just sitting there going, huh, can I please get some pulse rifle rounds, you fucking asshole? But that's like the only that's the only real complaint besides maybe the size of the pulse rifle. And I'll get into that right now so I don't forget because my mind's fucking horrible. The one complaint is that the cutscenes kind of feel like they favor the plasma cutter. So there'll be some scenes where you're like holding onto a guardrail or your hands in the ground where the plasma cutter can rest easily on that surface. But no, if you have the pulse rifle or any other weapon, it just clips through it. And it is kind of immersion breaking. But that's just one gripe I have with it in terms of like cutscene consistency. Kind of similar to like Metal Gear Solid 5 where it was a little bit, bullshit that the mods weren't capable of changing certain cutscenes where you're switched back to Venom Snake, which is why I'm glad again, there was that breakthrough mentioned in a previous video about, the mods finally being able to overwrite those cutscenes with custom head meshes, but whatever, that's just a preference. But yeah, that's the only other gripe I could think of in terms of the pulse rifle, but everything else is just positives. But despite all that, it's just economical to use the pulse rifle because you get way more ammo with it. But let's just continue onward. When fully upgraded, the firing rate, it's still static, but it's the fastest out of any other weapon besides maybe the Ripper because it's literally a levitating fucking blade. But beyond that, the reload is still pretty good, and the clip size is fucking massive compared to, like, say, if I recall, I think the plasma cutter can get up to 20 rounds. The pulse rifle just fucking shits on it and gives you 175 fucking rounds. And beyond all of that, I mean, you may think at first that, because it does half the damage, it's half effective. No, it isn't. Because, again, you can just, do the math in terms of how much ammo is in the gun, separate from the ammo capacity. But let's just say, 18 damage times 20 in a magazine. That's 360 fucking rounds. So now let's just do... 380 damage in a clip. Sorry. Blech. So now let's just do 9 damage times the 175 with the pulse rifle. 1,575 damage. Given you gotta fit a few more extra rounds into that bad boy. But in terms of, like, overall damage throughout the magazine, it's obviously a lot more better. But enough of the mathematics. How does it work in actual combat? Ugh. Gotta love the unhealthy lifestyle. Well, from my experience, it doesn't really take that many fucking rounds to dismember an enemy. Now, of course, I think what the pulse rifle does differently in the plasma cutter is a surgical tool. Well, if we're talking about Dead Space 2 and Dead Space 1, it's literally a mining tool. But it's surgical in the sense that it has precision behind it. It's accurate with its shots in terms of dismembering. But with the pulse rifle, it's more of crowd control because of that massive magazine and the massive firing rate. But if you still take your time with the pulse rifle, it could still be a precise assault weapon because you could still take out limbs. And basically in a few controlled bursts, especially on a stasis enemy, I think that's where it helps out the most. If you stasis the enemy and take your time aiming for the limbs, you can take out a limb within like 2 taps of the button. Because I remember in Dead Space 1, every tap, you fire 2 rounds. I think in Dead Space 2, it's just 1 round per tap, but I could be fucking wrong. But effectively, it just takes a couple of taps to dismember the limb, and you can still follow the same rules of dismemberment, rules of combat. You decide. But, couple taps, dismember 1 limb, go after the other one, there you go, necromorph is fucking down. Or incapacitate until it finds other limbs to attach itself to. But that's where I think the pulse rifle is a winner, in my opinion, just because it has a lot more utility. And, totally forgot about the last bit. the alternate fire. In Dead Space 1, it was shit. Let's just get that out of the way. You slam the butt of the gun down, you duck underneath it, and it just becomes a fucking hose of firing your ammo in a 360-degree area. It was completely fucking wasteful. You missed all your shots practically. Whoever thought that was a good move, yeah, no, that did not fucking work. It may have helped in a couple of instances where there might have been some necromorphs swarming you, but you're better off taking the hit and save yourself a shit ton of ammo instead. Now, Dead Space 2, on the other hand, it's one of those instances where they did improve on it, even though it's a little bit weird as to like where this secondary fire is. But what it does, it replaces that thing with a grenade launcher, and that has a lot more applications. Well, only one for the swarm, the fucking little spider babies that come out of the pregnant belly, but it's still effective for doing some splash damage. It only takes 25 rounds. Now, of course, depending on who you're up against and you try and do the mathematics behind it, because I don't even think the grenade launcher is that powerful. It's more for, like, the weaker enemies. So you could still try and do the math in your head in that split second and go, okay, it's better just to use the primary fire to save a few extra rounds and save it for a future necromorph. But I will confess, the grenade launcher's still cool, and physics still apply. If you're in 0G, it's going to have a straight, sure shot. Otherwise, it's an arc grenade launcher like any other game. I still think it's an improvement over the, the circular firing shit. But when add all up together, it really does just boil down on, like, some utility and simple math, and that's just where I think the pulse rifle wins. Obviously, it still has, like, a couple of disadvantages. If you're talking about Dead Space 1, it has a shit-altering fire. And the pushback isn't as strong as Dead Space 2. I think that's one of the things they also buffed, besides the alternate fire being a grenade launcher. They buffed the stopping power of it to make them stun-locked longer. So you could alternate from different enemies. But, I mean, you're better off just putting one fucker down before you move on to the next one. And then, of course, the plasma cutter, it still has the staying force of being the staple gun of Isaac Clarke, and it's still a balanced gun. But when you put the math into it and some utility between the fast firing rate, the large magazine capacity, the stopping power, the more useful secondary for taking out multiple enemies as opposed to a 90-degree arc that's fundamentally built in with the triangular shape of the pulse rifle, it just fucking wins, in my opinion. It's just one of those clear-cut winners that you should just go to. Now, of course, maybe on higher difficulty levels, it's not fucking needed, because you might need the heavier punch of a plasma cutter. But if you're just playing it as a base normal mode, and you have it fully upgraded, the pulse rifle can still kick fucking ass, get you way more bang for your buck out of every fucking shot, in my opinion. And it does make you feel like a space marine with it. And that's just my thought on it. Basically, I just think the pulse rifle wins, even though it does have a couple of its, quirks that may give it a negative, but I just feel it's still good. But, naturally, both guns are still great. Plasma cutter and pulse rifle are equally great, just in their own rights. But I just wanted to share these thoughts, make a small video I thought about yesterday. There is another video I'll probably do later on today by myself, because I'm kind of in that video making mood. Am I even making a video? I'm just talking to myself and recording it. But hey, I kind of enjoy it. It's not bad. Gets my thoughts out there, my take on certain things. Oh, and of course, as a disclaimer, yes, the pulse rifle does make a return in Dead Space 3, but with how fucking gimped it is and how, like, the upgrade system works in that one, I don't want to include it for that reason. And again, the fact that, I haven't really played Dead Space 3 that much, and we all know what the clear winner of, like, what the clear winning gun is in that fucking game, and sadly, you have to pay for it. Hint, it starts with the letter E and rhymes with Evangelion. But that's all for now. I somehow managed to ramble on about this shit for a half an hour. I'm actually surprised. It's kind of up there of a podcast, but hey, it's just me mumbling about one topic. If this is something you like for me to talk about more about comparing weapons or talking about certain gameplay items, leave a like. Oh god, I sound like other fucking YouTubers. Oh god. Fuck it. Do whatever the hell you want. Hope you enjoyed this. Stay safe. Have a great day. This is the manager from GT Gaming Den. Yeah. Game on.
If you like our content, please like and subscribe. See you later.